For as the light of the morning cometh out of the east, and shineth even unto the west, and covereth the whole earth, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Therefore sanctify yourselves, that your minds become single to God, and the days will come that you shall see him. For he will unveil his face unto you, and it shall be in his own time, and in his own way, and according to his own will. This is Unveiling Jesus Christ.
Hello and welcome to another podcast on Unveiling Jesus Christ. I'm John Cassanet. My last podcast addressed the merger of the ecclesiastical kingdom of God with the political kingdom of God, commencing with the gathering of saints at Adam-ondi-Ahman. You may recall that this merger will be complete as of the second coming, when Christ will destroy all earthly kingdoms and establish fully his millennial theocracy. Today, I'll talk about the redemption and establishment of the latter-day Zion during the 3.5-year interval between the gathering at Adam-ondi-Ahman and the second coming. For the nutshell version of this podcast, you can check out section 144 of my book that you can find on my website at unveilingjesuschrist.com. So before we talk about the redemption of Zion, we need to cover a few of the basics. It's kind of like the Wizard of Oz, where Dorothy had to begin her journey to the Emerald City at the beginning of the Yellow Brick Road. So the beginning of our journey begins with the fundamental question of what is Zion? Zion means sunny mountain and fortress. The origin or etymology, however, is somewhat uncertain, and depending on the context, Zion can have different meanings. B.H. Roberts gives some examples of these differences, saying, the word Zion, then, is applied to a people. It is the name of a hill in the south part of Jerusalem. It is the name of a city built by Enoch and his people. It is to be the name of a city built in the last days by the saints of the Most High upon the continent of America. Close quote. Zion has also been used to refer to a specific place, a general area, and a condition, as Joseph Fielding McConkie describes in this quote, saying, in the Book of Mormon, we encounter what the world would consider to be an unusual form and meaning for the word Zion. In an Old Testament setting, Zion usually has reference to the Holy Mount, or, by extension, to the city of Jerusalem. Here, and in numerous other places, Zion seems to represent the gathering place of the believers, the society of the pure in heart, the setting for the saints. Close quote. Zion was, of course, a name for the ancient city of Enoch, whose righteous citizens were taken to heaven before the flood. Moses 7:69 tells us that Enoch and all his people walked with God, and he dwelt in the midst of Zion. And it came to pass that Zion was not, for God received it up unto his own bosom, and from thence went forth the saying, Zion is fled. Close quote. In this connection, Zion came to mean the city of holiness and perfection, and that same connotation applies to latter-day Zion that will be built. The same connotation applies to the inhabitants of that future Zion. Long after Enoch, and in the post-flood and post-Exodus time, Zion was the name given to the ancient city of David in 2 Samuel 5:7. This is the first time the name appears in connection with David's conquest of Jerusalem, saying that David took the stronghold of Zion. The same is the city of David. Close quote. The city of David was originally the eastern hill of the ancient city of Jerusalem. It's an 11-acre finger-shaped hilltop on the southeast of the present city of Jerusalem, and it's surrounded on three sides by these deep ravines, except on the north. At the time of David's conquest, there was this impenetrable Jebusite fortress that stood on this eastern hill called Zion. Now, impenetrable may be a bit of a misnomer since David did conquer it, but the Jebusites were so confident in its security that they defied David and said the lame and the blind could defend it against the Israelites. The Jebusites go back 400 years before David's conquest, making Zion the oldest known name for what became Jerusalem. It was certainly the first place in Jerusalem occupied by buildings, and after David captured the Jebusites' stronghold of Zion, he called their Zion the city of David. On this eastern hill called the city of David, he built his palace and a citadel, and this is where the original tabernacle was located with the Ark of the Covenant. After the Temple of Solomon was constructed on Mount Moriah on the western slope and a western hill, the name Zion shifted to the Temple Mount, and in the 1989 Sperry Symposium, we get a description of this shift in name, both geographically and semantically, saying, with the movement of the Ark of the Covenant to the Temple Mount, Zion came to be used interchangeably with the idea of the holy mountain of Jehovah, and thus with the city of Jerusalem. Close quote. So allow me to recap for just a moment all we know about the word Zion and where it came from. It was the name of the eastern hill where the Jebusite fortress was located, and then after David's conquest, this Zion was called the city of David. But then, after Solomon's temple was constructed on Mount Moriah, the name Zion shifted to the Temple Mount or the western hill, and eventually Zion came to be used to identify the entire city of Jerusalem. And so we have with that name the connotation of it being a place of a fortress, but also a holy place. In addition to these uses of the name, Joseph Smith said that all of North and South America is called Zion, saying, the whole of America is Zion itself, from north to south, and is described by the prophets who declare that it is Zion where the mountain of the Lord should be, and that it should be in the center of the land. Close quote. If I can digress here just for a second and speak geographically, it is interesting that Independence, Missouri is, in fact, the center of the Western Hemisphere. If you look at Canada and all of South America and you try and figure out exactly where these land masses would have their center, guess what? It would be Independence, Missouri. So just a little interesting little factoid. So the phrase mountain of the Lord that Joseph Smith refers to in the last quote comes from Isaiah chapter 2, verse 2, as explained by Donald Perry, saying, Isaiah 2:2, mountain of the Lord's house. This term represents the temple of God. Jerusalem is also Zion. The principal features of both Zions will be the temple that will be established in each, and the Lord who will sit as king in the throne rooms of the temple. Close quote. Even though Zion is all of North and South America, the modern geographical references to Zion usually means the New Jerusalem in Jackson County, Missouri, and surrounding locations such as Adam-ondi-Ahman. Thus, in Doctrine and Covenants, section 84:2, we have this description of the New Jerusalem as Zion, saying, Yea, the word of the Lord concerning his church established in the last days for the restoration of his people, as he has spoken by the mouth of his prophets, and for the gathering of his saints to stand upon Mount Zion, which shall be the city of New Jerusalem. Close quote. And in Doctrine and Covenants, section 117, verses 8 and 9, we have Adam-ondi-Ahman equated with the name of Zion also, saying, Is there not enough room on the mountains of Adam-ondi-Ahman and on the plains of Olahah, Shineah, or the land where Adam dwelt, that you should covet that which is but the drop, and neglect the more weighty matters. Therefore come up hither unto the land of my people, even Zion." Close quote. Erastus Snow made a similar connection to this expansive reading of Zion in the area of Missouri, saying, "God has had his eye upon this American continent as the place where he first commenced his great work on the earth, where the greatest manifestations of his power were exhibited in the days of the fathers before the flood, when the fathers were gathered in the valley of Adam-ondi-Ahman, and where he determined ultimately to establish his Zion and gather together his people." Close quote. In addition to its geographical meaning, Zion is also the name for the pure in heart. This comes from Moses chapter 7, verses 17 through 18, which describes the people and city of Enoch, saying, "The Lord blessed the land and called his people Zion, because they were of one heart and one mind, and dwelt in righteousness, and there was no poor among them." Close quote. This same definition applies to the saints today, particularly those who hope to be citizens of the latter-day Zion in Missouri. Saints who fail to meet celestial standards cannot be citizens of Zion, and they should heed this warning from Joseph Fielding Smith, who said, "The strict and definite meaning of the word Zion is the pure in heart. The pure in heart have been promised protection in the days of wickedness, when the judgments of the Almighty are passing over the nations. Nevertheless, Zion, as that term has reference to the members of the church collectively, shall also be punished if she observe not to do whatsoever I have commanded her, the Lord has said." Close quote. Spencer W. Kimball describes the nature of the celestial standard applicable to the citizens of Zion, saying, "Zion is a name given by the Lord to his covenant people who are characterized by purity of heart and faithfulness in caring for the poor, the needy, and the distressed. This highest order of priesthood society is founded on the doctrines of love, service, work, self-reliance, and stewardship, all of which are circumscribed by the covenant of consecration." Close quote. In other words, righteous members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints that make and keep temple covenants are Zion, and those covenants include the covenant of consecration. So with this background in mind, let's begin to focus on the geographical Zion that will be located in Missouri. In July 1831, the Lord identified Independence in Jackson County, Missouri, as the center place of Zion in Doctrine and Covenants, section 57, verses 2 and 3, saying, "Wherefore, this is the land of promise, and the place for the city of Zion. And thus saith the Lord your God, if you will receive wisdom, here is wisdom. Behold, the place which is now called Independence is the center place." Close quote. Gerald Lund explains the effect this 1831 revelation must have had on the early saints, saying, "It is not hard to imagine the excitement such a prophecy caused among the early members of the church as they read Ether 13:4, 6 and 8. John the Revelator had also spoken of the New Jerusalem in Revelation 21:2, but no one had ever dared suppose that it would be built here in America. In September 1830, the Lord made it clear that no one knew yet where the city, also called the City of Zion, was to be located, but finally, in July 1831, the Lord revealed that the center place for the City of Zion was the small town of Independence, Jackson County, Missouri." Close quote. Jackson County was not only identified as the center place of Zion, but also the location for the New Jerusalem, which is synonymous with the name Zion. The background to this designation is given in the Encyclopedia of Mormonism, saying, the first Latter-day Saints entered Missouri in January 1831 as part of the Lamanite mission. Joseph Smith arrived in July 1831. In August, he selected a site for a temple and designated Jackson County as the location of the millennial Zion, or New Jerusalem, and as the gathering place for the saints. The 10th Article of Faith, written by the prophet Joseph Smith in 1842, declares that the New Jerusalem will be built upon the American continent. He learned this as he translated the Book of Mormon. Additional revelation on this subject came in September 1830 and was further clarified in the subsequent months. In July 1831, Joseph Smith traveled to Jackson County, Missouri, at the command of the Lord, where it was announced that the long-awaited gathering of Israel would commence. The city of Zion, also called the New Jerusalem, and its temple would be built in Independence, Missouri. Close quote. After the July 1831 revelation in Doctrine and Covenants, section 57, Joseph Smith dedicated the temple lot at Independence on August 3, 1831. This will be the site of the central temple of the church. Now, I know, we all have our fondness for the temple in Salt Lake City, and we can't wait to have it reopened, but the future temple at Independence will be the centerpiece of Christ's millennial kingdom. Joseph Fielding Smith gave the historical context for the temple dedication at Independence in August 1831 when he said, on the second day of August, the first log was laid and the foundation started for the establishment of Zion in Kaw Township, 12 miles west of Independence. The log was carried and placed by 12 men in honor of the 12 tribes of Israel. On the third day, the prophet dedicated the spot for the temple, a little west of Independence, as it was in 1831. It was a season of joy, said the prophet, to those present, and afforded a glimpse of the future, which time will yet unfold to the satisfaction of the faithful. Close quote. The day before the temple dedication, Sidney Rigdon dedicated the region round about as a gathering place, and this is recorded in Doctrine and Covenants section 58, which pronounced this land consecrated and dedicated to the Lord for a possession and inheritance for the saints. After these events, saints immediately began to gather to Missouri as the land of Zion and the place of their inheritance. The first group of faithful saints came from the Colesville, New York branch under the leadership of Newell Knight and arrived in July 1831. Another 100-plus saints arrived that summer from Kirtland. By the summer of 1833, there were more than 1,000 saints living in 5 Missouri settlements. The Lord directed the saints to purchase the land in Doctrine and Covenants, section 57. The instruction was to buy every tract of land lying west of Independence to the unorganized Indian Territory. One publication, edited by Larry Porter and Susan Easton Black, states, the prophet and 6 others formed the United Firm, or United Order, with one branch to operate in Kirtland and the other in Jackson County. This group, organized as a partnership, held property and conducted general church business, supported the migration to Kirtland and to Jackson County, purchased land for the settlement of the saints. By purchasing large tracts of land, 1 or more square miles at the time, they were able to avoid competitive bidding on smaller tracts and thus provide land more economically. Eventually, they bought about 250 square miles of land in Missouri, including 1 whole county and parts of the others. Close quote. A book entitled Regional Studies in Latter-day Saint History also adds that 232 petitioners stated in petitions made to Congress that they purchased 6,501 acres of land for $55,046, which averages less than $9 per acre. The average per claim was $237.27 for land. $9 per acre for land in Missouri was not an extremely high price in 1839. And I would have to say it's not an extremely high price in 2025 either. So these large tracts of land were purchased with the expectation that the saints would quickly build the New Jerusalem. Doctrine and Covenants, section 84, verses 4 and 5, states specifically that verily this is the word of the Lord, that the city New Jerusalem shall be built by the gathering of the saints, beginning at this place, even the place of the temple, which temple shall be reared in this generation. For verily this generation shall not all pass away until an house shall be built unto the Lord, and a cloud shall rest upon it, which cloud shall be even the glory of the Lord, which shall fill the house. Close quote. Doctrine and Covenants, section 52, verse 43, likewise stated that I, the Lord, will hasten the city in its time. These prophecies, unfortunately, were not fulfilled, as explained in the following quote from the Messages of the First Presidency, which says, in this revelation, speaking here of Doctrine and Covenants, section 84, verses 1 through 5, part of which I just quoted, the Lord definitely declares that a city and a temple are to be built at Independence, Missouri, and that this was to be accomplished during the existing generation. Because of wicked persecutions, the church was obliged to leave the state of Missouri, which had been designated as the gathering place of the saints. Under order signed by Lilbun W. Boggs, governor of Missouri, 12,000 members of the church were compelled to abandon their homes and flee to the state of Illinois, where they established the city of Nauvoo. Close quote. The Lord revealed further in Doctrine and Covenants, section 124, verses 49 and 51, that when I give a commandment to any of the sons of men to do a work unto my name, and those sons of men go with all their might, and with all they have to perform that work, and cease not their diligence, and their enemies come upon them and hinder them from performing that work, behold, it behooveth me to require that work no more at the hands of those sons of men, but to accept of their offerings. Therefore, for this cause have I accepted the offerings of those whom I commanded to build up a city and a house unto my name in Jackson County, Missouri, and were hindered by their enemies, saith the Lord your God. Close quote. Unfortunately, that was not the complete story, and that certainly applied to a number of the saints, but not necessarily to all. There was a reason for the persecution, and the rest of the story was that many saints came but were not worthy to build and inherit Zion at that time because they failed to live the celestial law of consecration. Roy Doxey has explained this, saying, the saints in Missouri were commanded to live the law of consecration and to redeem Zion, but because of disobedience to commandments, the Lord said they were afflicted, persecuted, and driven from the land. Close quote. Hiram Andrus explained how the law of consecration was supposed to have worked in Missouri but did not, saying, all the saints throughout the land were required to sell their possessions, gather all their money together, and send an agent to buy up all the land in the region round about far west Missouri, and get a patent for the land from the government, then deed it over to the church. Then every man should come up there to the land of their promised inheritance and consecrate what they had to the Lord. In return, the prophet would set apart a tract of land for each saint, the amount to correspond with the number of the saint's family, and this land should be for each saint an everlasting inheritance. Close quote. Think about that a little bit as you consider the covenant of consecration that is made in the temple today and the wording of the covenant. Now, the law of consecration was first revealed in December 1831 in Kirtland, but the law was soon abandoned in that location. Living the law, however, was required of saints in Missouri, and they had to agree to it by covenant before they could even go to Missouri. Richard Cowan explains what happened to those who were disobedient, saying, in Doctrine and Covenants, section 85, 3 through 5, the Lord warned that individuals going to Zion, that is Jackson County, Missouri, who refused to live the law of consecration would not have their names recorded among the names of those worthy to receive blessings. Close quote. As we learn in the temple today, the law of consecration required saints to consecrate their time, their talents, and their property to the building up of the kingdom of God on earth and for the establishment of Zion. Joseph Fielding Smith explains the purpose of this law, saying, in this revelation, and he's referring here to Doctrine and Covenants, section 42, the law of consecration is stated definitely as the law on which the New Jerusalem is to be built. This law is given for the benefit of the poor, for the building of Zion, and the work of the ministry. The members of the church should consecrate their properties and then be appointed stewards in the service of the Lord. Through this celestial law, that is consecration, the saints are to become the covenant people of the Lord. We cannot enter into the fullness of the covenants pertaining to Zion until we have reached the point where we can live such a divine law. Close quote. Thus we see that when the saints in Missouri lacked the faith and were disobedient to this law, the Lord empowered the original settlers to maliciously persecute the saints. Joseph Fielding Smith described how the persecutions began, saying, in April 1833, the first gathering of the mob in Jackson County took place. Some 300 men gathered to decide upon a plan of campaign for the removal of the members of the church out of Jackson County. Being alarmed for their safety, the elders in Jackson County met in solemn prayer and petitioned the Lord that the efforts of their enemies might fail. While praying, we may well suppose that they were reminded of their disagreements and bitterness of spirit which had caused so much concern in the heart of the prophet and the brethren in Kirtland. Nevertheless, the saints had failed to keep the commandments and the covenants given them in regard to the building up of Zion, and their criticisms and jealousies had reached out in criticism of the prophet himself. Close quote. The 1989 Sperry Symposium adds that in a revelation given to Joseph Smith on 16 December 1833, after the saints' expulsion from Jackson County, Missouri, the Lord said, I, the Lord, have suffered the affliction, that is their expulsion, to come upon them wherewith they have been afflicted in consequence of their transgressions. He specified the nature of their transgressions, saying, there were jarrings and contentions and envyings and strifes and lustful and covetous desires among them. Therefore, by these things they polluted their inheritances. Close quote. Joseph Smith spoke of the persecutions in the history of the church, saying, Missouri has robbed and mobbed me, and 12 or 15,000 innocent inhabitants, murdered hundreds, and expelled the residue at the point of the bayonet without law, contrary to the express language of the Constitution of the United States and every state in the Union, and contrary to the custom and usage of civilized nations, and especially one holding up the motto, the asylum of the oppressed. Close quote. When the Missouri mobs learned that a Mormon army known as Zion's Camp was about to head their way from Kirtland, they burned about 170 Mormon buildings in Jackson County. By 1839, the Saints were forced to flee Missouri completely under the threat of extermination via an order issued by Governor Lilbun Boggs. This occurred in the winter of 1838 and 1839 at gunpoint and involved about 10,000 church members. Traveling east, they crossed the Missouri River into Illinois. The extermination order stated that, quote, the Mormons must be treated as enemies and must be exterminated or driven from the state, if necessary, for the public good, close quote. George A. Smith recounts the effects of this extermination order, saying, the Latter-day Saints paid the United States government some $318,000 for land in the state of Missouri, but yet, in the winter and early spring of 1839, they were expelled from that state with the entire loss of their lands and improvements and most of their personal property, under an exterminating order from Lilbun W. Boggs, governor of that state, requiring them to leave under pain of extermination. But they were told that any of them who would renounce their religion would be permitted to stay. The result was that about 15,000 persons were expelled from Missouri, close quote. Thus we see that the saints abandoned the land of their inheritance, but not their resolve to one day redeem Zion without the shedding of blood. Joseph Fielding Smith spoke about the redemption of Zion, saying, it appears from this declaration, and he's referring here to Doctrine and Covenants, section 103, verses 16 through 20, that the redemption of Zion was not to come immediately, but was to be postponed to some future day. Moreover, that day would not come until the members of the church were willing to keep their covenants. It may be necessary, in order to bring this to pass, for the Lord to use drastic measures and cleanse the church from everything that offends. Orson Pratt, discoursing on the redemption of Zion, said, when we go back to Jackson County, we are to go back with power. Do you suppose that God will reveal his power among an unsanctified people who have no regard nor respect for his laws and the institutions, but who are filled with covetousness? No, was his answer. Close quote. After the saints were forced from Jackson County in 1833, the Lord no longer required members to live the law of consecration. Instead, he gave the law of tithing to the church in 1838, which was essentially a schoolmaster that replaced the higher law of consecration. However, as one text edited by Daniel Ludlow explains, Zion can only be built up by the law that God revealed for that purpose, which is the law of consecration, not the law of tithing. The law of tithing was instituted because the people could not abide the greater law. If we could live up to the law of consecration, then there would be no necessity for the law of tithing, because it would be swallowed up in the greater law. The law of consecration requires all. The law of tithing only requires 1/10 of your increase annually. Close quote. Bruce R. McConkie also added that when Zion is fully established, it will be by obedience to the law of the celestial kingdom, which law is operative in the stakes of Zion only in part. As of now, we are living under a preparatory law, as it were. As the Mosaic law was a schoolmaster to prepare Israel for the fullness of the gospel, so the church and kingdom, as now constituted, is a schoolmaster to prepare the saints for inheritance in that perfect society, souls of which Zion will be composed. The most obvious illustration of this concept is that we today have the law of tithing, which we do not live perfectly, but when Zion is built, we will have the law of consecration in its fullness. Close quote. The law of tithing remains in effect today, but the land of Zion will only be redeemed when church members, as citizens of Zion, make and keep a covenant with God to live the law of consecration. Lorenzo Snow makes this very clear in his statement, saying, "So, in regard to the principles of the United Order, its principles are too sacred, and I assure you that we will never go back to Jackson County, Missouri, there to build up the New Jerusalem of the latter days until there is a perfect willingness on our part to conform to its rules and principles." Close quote. If saints do so, they will become heirs of God's kingdom, as stated by Hiram Andrus, saying, "By the covenant of consecration, the saints become heirs of God and joint heirs with Jesus Christ. As an heir, each man has the right, under the law of Zion, to be a steward over a portion of the Lord's property, which is delegated to him and secured to him by a deed of stewardship, giving him the right to hold and manage it." Close quote. Only as saints live the celestial law of consecration will the city of New Jerusalem be built with its temple at Independence, Missouri. The 25th Annual Sidney B. Sperry Symposium states, "The reinstitution of the law of consecration in Zion, the New Jerusalem, is prerequisite number 8. The Lord commanded the saints to let those commandments which he has given concerning Zion and her law be executed and fulfilled after her redemption. The Lord commanded the early saints called to move to Missouri to covenant to live the law of consecration. The Lord then declared, 'There has been a day of calling, but the time has come for a day of choosing, and let those be chosen that are worthy. And it shall be manifest unto my servant by the voice of the Spirit, those that are chosen, and they shall be sanctified.'" Close quote. Today in the temple, we accept the law of consecration by covenant. So this is a day of calling. We are called upon to accept the law, but there will come a day of choosing when we must choose to live the law. If we fail to do so according to the covenants that we have made, we will not be sanctified, and we will surely not be worthy of Zion. Zion cannot be redeemed on any other principle, including tithing. This is clearly stated in Doctrine and Covenants, section 105, verse 5, which says, "Zion cannot be built up unless it is by the principles of the law of the celestial kingdom. Otherwise, I cannot receive her unto myself." Close quote. Elder Orson F. Whitney said, "Zion is greater than any one of her stakes. It will require the law of consecration to bring forth Zion, while the lesser law suffices for the creation of stakes. When the building up of Zion was postponed, the law of consecration was suspended, and the United Order went into abeyance. Then was introduced the law of tithing, a law adapted to the undeveloped condition of the church." Close quote. Doctrine and Covenants, section 136, verse 18, states that Zion shall be redeemed in mine own due time. When that time arrives, the saints must rise above past failings and live the law of consecration as a prerequisite to redeeming Zion. Robert Millett talks about the timing of Zion's redemption in Missouri, saying, "The modern church can therefore have faith that the promises of the Lord concerning the place called Zion, the New Jerusalem, will all be fulfilled in the Lord's due time. Zion will be built by the gathering of the saints. It is the saints' inheritance, reserved for the obedient. It will be built before the second coming, and will eventually prosper. Zion will be honored by the nations of the earth, which will acknowledge the sovereignty of Zion. It will be an ensign to the world, and God will protect it. Zion's redemption will come by power. Christ's presence will go before the saints to help them possess it, and Enoch's Zion will join Zion on earth." Close quote. B.H. Roberts has also written that it is only through the observance of that law, meaning consecration, that Zion can be redeemed. The Lord therefore commanded the elders to wait a season for the redemption of Zion until the saints should obtain more experience, learn obedience, and until means could be raised to purchase all the lands in Jackson County that could be purchased and also in the surrounding counties, and until the Lord's army had become very great and sanctified before him. Close quote. At this point, the little season of waiting, chastening, and tribulation is nearing its end. Consider the means the church has today to purchase the lands in Missouri. Consider the sanctification process that will occur at the future gathering of saints at Adam-ondi-Ahman. At that location, Latter-day Saints will receive the higher law of consecration. Without a definitive statement as to the timing of all this, the Encyclopedia of Mormonism states that at the proper time, the Lord's leaders will implement the law of consecration. While it is not clear what procedures will be revealed, Latter-day Saints anticipate that the principles of stewardship, equality, and agency and accountability will eventually be subscribed to by all participants, and that the goals originally envisioned will be reached. Close quote. I'm satisfied that the time for all this to occur will be the gathering at Adam-ondi-Ahman. As I have said in past podcasts, exaltation-worthy saints at Adam-ondi-Ahman will be crowned kings and queens in the kingdom of Zion, and will therefore have the right to physically possess the land of Zion in Missouri as part of their kingdom and inheritance. Surely there will be no disconnect between this event and the implementation of the law of consecration. Orson Pratt seems to confirm this connection, saying, "There will be a great preparation before the redemption of Zion. There must be a preparation here, and it would not surprise me if the Spirit of the Lord should come upon the presidency of this people, and we should be told to enter into the higher law pertaining to our property. They may be made stewards, but the time will come when they shall be bona fide inheritors. The Revelation tells us when that time shall come, that when the seventh angel sounds his trumpet, and after the people have proved themselves in the stewardships, and when Christ comes in his glory, they shall be made possessors and be made equal with him." Close quote. Now notice here that Orson Pratt seems to connect the timing of kingship to the second coming, but he also says there must be a time of preparation for it. Daniel the prophet, as we have seen, establishes the kingship of saints to Adam-ondi-Ahman 3.5 years before the second coming. So there is your preparatory period. Now, without being specific as to the timing, James Talmage also states that modern revelation is rich in evidence of an approaching reign of righteousness with Christ as king. Witness the following: "And also the Lord shall have power over his saints, and shall reign in their midst. For in mine own due time I will come upon the earth in judgment, and my people shall be redeemed and shall reign with me on earth." Close quote. From the foregoing, I conclude that the saints will be crowned and receive their inheritance once they are purified and make a covenant of consecration at Adam-ondi-Ahman. Then the land of Zion will be cleansed, as foretold by Brigham Young, who said, "Zion will be weeded. The iniquitous acts of men will bring their own destruction, and Zion will be cleansed before this great and dreadful day comes, when war shall be among all nations, and in Zion there will be peace." Close quote. Now, if it sounds like he's talking about Armageddon, he is. And if you're thinking, we have a lot to do in 3.5 years between the gathering of saints at Adam-ondi-Ahman and the second coming. For example, we've got to redeem Zion in Missouri and begin gathering to our inheritance. We've got to do all this weeding that Brigham Young refers to. We've got to construct the city of Zion. We've got to construct the temple at Independence. So it's a good thing that we have a lot of practice recently building temples. That's all I can say. So if you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed, consider what it says in Doctrine and Covenants, section 84, verses 96 to 98, saying, "For I, the Lord Almighty, have laid my hands upon the nations to scourge them for their wickedness, and plagues shall go forth, and they shall not be taken from the earth until I have completed my work, which shall be cut short in righteousness, until all shall know me who remain." Close quote. Now, if that sounds like the plagues of the seventh seal, including things like the first woe of spiritual darkness, the second woe, which we recognize as the period of Armageddon, then I think you're exactly right. And from Doctrine and Covenants, section 109, verse 59, which is part of the dedicatory prayer from the Kirtland Temple, it says, "We ask thee to appoint unto Zion and her other stakes besides this one, which thou hast appointed, that the gathering of thy people may roll on in great power and majesty, that thy work may be cut short in righteousness." Close quote. Clearly, the work after Adam-ondi-Ahman will be cut short in righteousness. It has to be. You've only got 3.5 years. The saints will be sanctified and holy. They will be a consecrated people as a result of their Adam-ondi-Ahman experience, and the Lord will cut short his work in righteousness to build the New Jerusalem and the temple at Independence, Missouri. Think about all that I have said about Adam-ondi-Ahman today and in past podcasts as you listen to this quote about the redemption of Zion by Robert Millet and see if there is not a clear connection between all these things. He said, "The Lord has been very clear about the preparation that the Latter-day Saints must make for the center place to be built up in preparation for the second coming." Note he says before the second coming. In answering the question, why was not Zion, the New Jerusalem in Missouri, redeemed, the Lord outlined the preparation we must make for this dream to come about. First, the saints should wait for a little season for the redemption of Zion. In addition, the saints must be endowed with power from on high, and the army of Israel must become very great. It's not just that church membership must increase, but first, let my army become very great and let it be sanctified before me. The Lord promised the saints, and inasmuch as they follow the counsel which they receive, they shall have power after many days to accomplish all things pertaining to Zion. Zion cannot be built up unless it is by the principle of the law of the celestial kingdom. Close quote. Now consider the Lord's parable of Zion found in Doctrine and Covenants, section 101, verses 43 and 59 to 62, saying, "And now I will show unto you a parable that you may know my will concerning the redemption of Zion. And the servant said unto his Lord, When shall these things be? And he said unto his servant, When I will. Go ye straightway and do all things whatsoever I have commanded you. And this shall be my seal and blessing upon you, a faithful and wise steward in the midst of mine house, a ruler in mine kingdom. And his servant went straightway and did all things whatsoever his Lord commanded him, and after many days all things were fulfilled." Close quote. Notice again the reference here to the steward becoming a ruler in the kingdom. And that's exactly what Daniel says in Daniel 7, verse 22, where he's talking about the gathering of saints at Adam-ondi-Ahman, saying, quote, "Until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was given to the saints of the Most High, and the time came that the saints possessed the kingdom." Close quote. Notice how it's always the servants that become the possessors of the kingdom. In the parable, it's the servant who becomes a ruler in the kingdom. In Daniel chapter 7, verse 10, it was the thousands or 1,000,000 who minister to the Ancient of Days, who then possess the kingdom. In Revelation chapter 7, it was the 144,000 servants who eventually stand with Christ on Mount Zion and inherit Zion. So here's what we know. The Lord tells us in Doctrine and Covenants, section 103, verses 11 through 13, that I have decreed that your brethren, which have been scattered from Missouri, shall return to the lands of their inheritances, and shall build up the waste places of Zion. For after much tribulation, as I have said unto you in a former commandment, cometh the blessing. Behold, this is the blessing which I have promised after your tribulation and the tribulations of your brother, your redemption and the redemption of your brethren, even their restoration to the land of Zion, to be established, no more to be thrown down. But I say unto you, mine angel shall go up before you, and also my presence, and in time ye shall possess the goodly land. Close quote. Note how this scripture says that mine angels shall go before you. Does this not describe the angels and the faithful of all dispensations who gather together with mortal saints at Adam-ondi-Ahman? The scripture also says that my presence, or Christ's presence, shall go before as well. Christ will also be at Adam-ondi-Ahman, going before the mortal saints as they embark in their course to reclaim and redeem Zion. Everything points to the redemption of Zion in Missouri after the gathering at Adam-ondi-Ahman 3.5 years before the second coming. Joseph Fielding Smith also alludes to this timing when he said, the whole tenor of this law of consecration commandment seems to point to the fact that the saints should have deeds to the property in Jackson County and surrounding lands, but that the time for the redemption was to wait for a long time until the church should become very great, and then, when the time was ripe, the Lord would come forth to fight their battles. Apparently, it was to be when the kingdom of this world may be constrained to acknowledge that the kingdom of Zion is in very deed the kingdom of our God and his Christ. Therefore, let us become subject to her laws. From other scriptures, it appears that the time when the nations will acknowledge Zion as the kingdom of God is not yet come until our Redeemer comes to take his place as King of Kings. Close quote. Now, if you've been listening to my podcast, you'll know that Christ's coronation as King of Kings will occur at Adam-ondi-Ahman. This is also the time when Satan's power and dominion crest and then begins to recede as the power and dominion of Christ grows and he begins to take over. It's the time of the two witnesses in Jerusalem, showing that the Lord will fight the battles of his people. It is the time of Doctrine and Covenants, section 103 that I just quoted, that Christ will go before the saints. I've always been impressed that the Lord will send two witnesses to preserve and protect the Jews in Jerusalem, but in America, he will personally go before and protect his saints as he calls upon them to redeem Zion and to build the New Jerusalem. It's parallel to what happened anciently in the same location. After the gathering at Adam-ondi-Ahman anciently, Enoch began his ministry among a very wicked people for 365 years. And note the time. It's 3.5 times 100, or 3.5 times 10 times 10. And if you've listened to any of my podcasts on numerology, you'll know the significance here. So we have essentially 350 years before the city of Enoch was taken up, and how that relates and is parallel to the 3.5 years before the second coming, when the saints of Zion will be taken up in clouds and be received as Christ descends in glory. After the gathering at modern Adam-ondi-Ahman, we are told that one will go before the saints like Moses for 3.5 years in the same place as recorded in Doctrine and Covenants, section 103, verses 16 through 18, which says, "Therefore I will raise up unto my people a man, who shall lead them like as Moses led the children of Israel. For ye are the children of Israel, and of the seed of Abraham, and ye must needs be led out of bondage by power, and with a stretched out arm. And as your fathers were led at the first, even so shall the redemption of Zion be." Close quote. Speaking of these verses, Joseph Fielding McConkie has written by way of explanation that under the direction of a modern Moses, Israel is once again to be gathered that she might be offered the blessings the Lord sought to give her fathers at Sinai. The place of the gathering is the New Jerusalem, where the mountain of the Lord's house is to be built. Here, the gathered hosts of Israel can sanctify themselves that they might stand where their forefathers would not, in the presence of their God. Close quote. The modern Moses will undoubtedly be the prophet or president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, unless another is appointed during the transfer of priesthood keys at Adam-ondi-Ahman. The church president currently holds the keys once held by Moses to gather Israel, as recorded in Doctrine and Covenants, section 110, verse 11, when Moses appeared at the Kirtland Temple on April 3 of 1836 and bestowed his gathering keys on Joseph and Oliver. This will be the day when the saints are called to leave Babylon, as Brigham Young has said, saying, "Just as soon as the Latter-day Saints are ready and prepared to return to Independence, Jackson County, in the state of Missouri, North America, just so soon will the voice of the Lord be heard. Arise now, Israel, and make your way to the center stake of Zion." Close quote. John Taylor spoke of the modern Exodus, saying, "We read in the scriptures of a time that is coming when there will be a howling among the merchants in Babylon, for men will not be found to buy their merchandise. This is in accordance with the prediction of John the Revelator. And the gold and the silver and the fine linen, etc., in Babylon will be of no avail. But before that time comes, we as a people must prepare for those events, that we may be able to live and sustain ourselves when in the midst of convulsions, and by will overtake the nations of the earth, and among others this nation. The time that is spoken of is not very far distant. He that will not take up his sword against his neighbor must needs flee to Zion for safety." Close quote. It is noteworthy that Moses used plagues to bring Israel from out of its physical bondage in Egypt. The Moses-like plagues of the seventh seal will likewise motivate Latter-day Saints to flee the physical and spiritual bondage of modern Babylon. For thus saith the Lord in Doctrine and Covenants, section 133, verses 5, 9, and 14, saying, "Go ye out from Babylon, be ye clean that bear the vessels of the Lord, and behold, and lo, this shall be their cry, and the voice of the Lord unto all people. Go ye forth unto the land Zion. Go ye forth unto the land of Zion, that the borders of my people may be enlarged, and that her stakes may be strengthened, and that Zion may go forth unto the regions round about. Go ye forth from among the nations, even from Babylon, and from the midst of wickedness, which is spiritual Babylon." Close quote. In this modern exodus to Missouri, as I have said, Christ will go before the sanctified saints to redeem the land through the power of God. Doctrine and Covenants, section 103, verse 15 states, "The redemption of Zion must needs come by power." The 1982 Sperry Symposium states, "In God's own due time, Zion will be redeemed. The Lord's enemies will be removed, and his presence will go before the saints to help them possess it. This redemption will come by power, and it will be as the deliverance of ancient Israel, meaning it appears that it will be brought about by acts of divine intervention rather than by acts of human power. Close quote. Joseph Smith also said in the history of the church that at the same time the standard should be lifted up, that the honest in heart, the meek of the earth among the Gentiles should seek unto it, and that Zion should be redeemed and be built up a holy city, that the glory and power of God should rest upon her and be seen upon her, that the watchman upon Mount Ephraim might cry, Arise ye, and let us go up unto Zion, the city of the Lord our God. Close quote. At Adam-ondi-Ahman, of course, Christ will be coronated, and he will raise the standard spoken of here. Adam-ondi-Ahman, as I have said, occurs at the midpoint of Armageddon. The entire world will be engaged in the battle to one degree or another, except for the citizens of Zion who flee Babylon to Zion in Missouri. Donald W. Perry gives us some insights into the safety found in Zion, saying, As locusts ravage green plants and trees, the armies will scourge the men and women of the earth, save those who are citizens of Zion, and who possess the seal of the living God on their foreheads. The saints, we are told, in a modern-day revelation, will dwell safely in Zion. Close quote. In this quote, Donald Perry cites Doctrine and Covenants, section 45, verses 66 through 70, in support of his statement that the saints will dwell safely in Zion. These verses can only be describing a condition after Adam-ondi-Ahman, when, quote, It shall be said among the wicked, Let us not go up to battle against Zion, for the inhabitants of Zion are terrible, wherefore we cannot stand. Close quote. Now put that again in the context of this idea that at Adam-ondi-Ahman we have the merger that will begin between the ecclesiastical and political kingdoms of God. What's happening here and what is described here about the world's view upon Zion can't possibly relate to any period of time before Adam-ondi-Ahman, to any period of time before Jesus Christ is coronated King of Kings, and to any period of time before the saints are crowned as kings and queens in Zion, and thus we have the merger of political and ecclesiastical, and the Church of the Firstborn begins to assert itself as a political power that will protect the saints in Zion. All this helps us to establish the timing of Adam-ondi-Ahman and what will occur with the redemption of Zion after that gathering. So let's conclude by saying we will get down to these last 3.5 years after the gathering at Adam-ondi-Ahman, when Zion will be restored. It will be redeemed. And that's when people will begin to say, we're terrible. And that's a compliment. In today's vernacular, if you're bad, that actually means you're good. So if you're terrible, it means the wicked will be in fear of Zion and her inhabitants. So I'm going to talk more about the conditions in Zion during the 3.5 years before the second coming, but I don't want to leave you with the impression that when the righteous saints redeem and gather to Zion, they will fight their way to a condition of security. Unlike the ancient Israelites who secured the promised land with bloodshed, the latter-day redemption of Zion will be completely opposite. The saints will accept the Lord's higher law of consecration at Adam-ondi-Ahman by covenant and will immediately possess the promised land without bloodshed. And I'll talk more about this in my next podcast. And until then, thanks for watching, listening, sharing, and subscribing, and to Jen and Kristen for all their help. I will see you next time on Unveiling Jesus Christ.